All right, today we're putting on our detective hats for a bit of a scientific investigation. The case we're trying to crack is a really tough one, something society has been grappling with for ages: youth crime. And our lead suspect? Well, it's something that feels like it's straight out of science fiction: virtual reality. So that brings us to the big question, right? Can we actually use this futuristic tech, VR, to tackle a problem as real and as complicated as youth crime? I mean, it sounds amazing, it's full of hope, but let's be honest, there's also a ton of hype. So let's dig in and see what the evidence actually says. Okay, so like any good detective, the first thing you gotta do is look for evidence. And in the world of science, evidence means one thing: data. So where do we even begin to look for clues? Well, the first lead seems like a total no-brainer. There's this huge, massive national database called the National Crime Victimization Survey, or NCVS for short. It's got tons of information, it's comprehensive. I mean, this has to be the perfect place to start, right? Well, not so fast. Almost right away, this amazing lead, it just completely hits a brick wall. It turns out this massive database is a total dead end. It's just the wrong tool for this particular job. And this is really important, so let me explain why. So here's the deal. The problem is pretty simple, really. That big database, the NCVS, it only talks to crime victims. But for our investigation, we need data on the offenders. We have to know who got the VR treatment, who didn't, and then track what happened to them afterwards. Using the NCVS for this question is kind of like trying to solve a crime by only interviewing people who live 3 towns over. It's just not going to give you the answers you need. So what do you do when the real-world data just isn't there? Well, a smart detective would build a model, right? Recreate the scene. And that is exactly what top researchers do. If the perfect data set doesn't exist, you build it. You simulate the perfect study using solid, realistic numbers from research that's already been peer-reviewed and published. So here's a quick look at how they set up this virtual case file. They created 500 participants, and they split them up. About half went into the VR group, and the other half into a control group. They even set the baseline chance of reoffending at 55%, which is a really realistic number based on a ton of previous studies. The whole point here isn't to just make stuff up. It's to show how you would correctly investigate this question, using a model that's totally grounded in reality. Okay, so the simulation is built, the virtual study is run, and now it's time to look at the results. And folks, this is where our little investigation takes a huge plot twist. Because the data showed 2 completely different, almost contradictory things happening at the same time. So first up, the main event: did the VR training actually stop these young people from reoffending? The answer, unfortunately, was a pretty clear nope. The numbers were almost exactly the same: 57.6% for the group that got nothing special, and 55.9% for the VR group. That difference is so tiny, it's statistically meaningless. So yeah, a bit of a letdown to start. But here comes the twist. Remember, the whole idea behind using VR for this is that it's supposed to increase empathy. And when they looked at that, the answer was a massive, resounding yes. The empathy scores for the VR group just skyrocketed. The effect size, which is just a fancy way of saying how big the change was 1.91. Now, you might not know what that means, but trust me, in social science, an effect size that big is a huge deal, like a grand slam home run. So, okay, let's just pause for a second. This is the core puzzle of our case. The VR treatment worked perfectly on one level. It made people way more empathetic. But the final outcome we actually care about, reducing crime, it didn't budge at all. So, what in the world is going on here? All right, this is where a real investigation gets interesting. We've hit a major contradiction, so we have to stop, take a breath, and just dig deeper into the evidence. We've got to follow the data wherever it takes us. And the first big clue comes from this analysis that basically looks at the chain of cause and effect. And what it shows is pretty fascinating. The link between getting VR training and having more empathy, super strong. Check. But the next link in the chain, the one between having more empathy and not committing a crime, that link was incredibly weak. It turns out just boosting someone's empathy wasn't nearly enough on its own to change their behavior in this model. And that brings us to our first official verdict from the investigation. The whole theory that VR reduces crime by increasing empathy is just not supported by this data. So for now, that particular lead has gone cold. But hey, a good detective never gives up that easily, right? What if the problem is that we're looking at everyone all at once? What if the effect is hiding? Maybe it works great for some people and not at all, or even badly for others. It's time to break down the evidence, to look for clues inside smaller, more specific groups. And bingo, there it is, the big aha moment of the whole case. When the researchers split the participants into two groups, those with a low risk of violence and those with a high risk, they found something wild. For the low-risk individuals, VR actually seemed to make things a tiny bit worse. But for the high-risk ones, it led to a 6.4% drop in reoffending. Think about that. The exact same treatment had completely opposite effects depending on who you gave it to. Let's just park on that number for a second. 6.4%. That's an absolute risk reduction. I mean, after hitting all those dead ends, this one number is the most promising clue we have found. It's telling us that VR probably isn't some magic wand you can wave at the whole problem, but it might be a really powerful, targeted tool for a very specific group of young people who are most at risk. So where does that leave us? What's the final verdict in our case? Well, it turns out the answer isn't a simple yes, it works or no, it doesn't. What this investigation gave us is something way more valuable, actually. It gave us a blueprint, a roadmap for how to find the real answer out in the real world. And this is it. This is the recipe for the perfect study. It tells you exactly how to design it, how many people you need, and most importantly, step 4, it screams that you have to group people by their violence risk right from the very start. You see, this whole simulation wasn't just a mental exercise. It was like creating a treasure map for the next team of researchers to follow. And that's where our investigation concludes, really, with one last question. We started with what looked like a dead end. We uncovered a really complex puzzle, and we ended up with a crystal clear blueprint. All the scientific detective work has been done. The map is there. The only question that's left is, who's going to pick up that map and actually build the study that could finally, once and for all, crack this case?